Ruminates! Hello, you absolute lovelies. Let's talk all about X-Men 97, Season 2, Episode 6. This might just be my second favorite episode of the entire season. It actually covers one of my favorite comic book storylines of modern X-Men mythology and sets up a lot of things that I do think are leading to Onslaught. Now, this episode, like every episode in this season, covers about a graphic novel worth of stuff in one 30-minute, 25-minute window. And I'm actually really impressed and slightly concerned how this can possibly end, because this episode covers Danger. This episode covers the return of Polaris in a much bigger way. This episode covers lots of interpersonal and inter-team dynamics. I'm covering this over at Real Rejects as well, doing live reactions, so I have a lot to say over on that video if you want to check that out as well. But I think one of the most fascinating things it's doing is it's introducing so many X teams so rapidly. This episode brings us not just the first day of the new students, which, if you know the comics, are a nice little amalgamation of Generation X and some of the newest modern X-Men in the main team, but it also introduces X-Corp at the end. And you guys hopefully watched the episode before I'm about to say a thing. It's the last 3 seconds, and introduces Gambit coming back as one of the Horsemen. So this episode has to do so much, but I think this particular episode is paced especially well. Now let's go in roughly the order of the show and let's break down some of the references and some of the things I think this is leading to. So this episode opens with Charles Xavier using the X powers and ideas to go through some sort of like therapy in his own way. He's using a combination of the Danger Room and Cerebro and also his own folly to kind of process grief in a way that a lot of us do naturally, but using external sources. So a lot of people, when they're grieving, relive moments and they think of the worst case scenarios. He has an external device through Danger of which to kind of self-punish himself, as, again, we all do with grief, but in a very direct and interestingly linear way. Now, from that grief and from that push comes this new villain, Danger. Now, Danger is straight out of this incredible run. There's a blend of it from the Joss Whedon Cassaday run, and there's some flavors of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run with Frank Quitely in this as well. But Danger as a character, I think, is fascinating because it is something that is the externalization of something that totally makes sense. In our society, we're using so many things to make our life a little simpler. We're using external things. I'm very anti-AI. If you follow my content, you probably know that. But we're using, as a society, not me, but people are using, your Claudes, your ChatGPTs and all these things to remove any actual knowledge. They're looking up things. They don't have to know much of anything, but they're giving all this data away for free. If something is free, you're the product. So all of these giant corporations are getting all of these ideas of exactly who you are and whittling it down. So that way the ads get more and more specific, and people seem to know something's going to pop up before they even think it because of stuff like this. Now, what's interesting is 20 years ago when Danger was written, the world was not here. Now that the world's here, it's interesting to add a layer to make it sci-fi is to make it Cerebro. Make it something that is actually reading your mind, and that's using Cerebro to plug in that much more, plus the power of the Danger Room to make it an externally violent and capable of taking on the X-Men thing. What better villain to fight the X-Men than the room that's training the X-Men? What more externalization of guilt Xavier would have to not be able to protect his X-Men than to have the physical manifestation of a training tool, a teacher that loses the ability to teach. A weaponized use of that inability is a perfect villain for these characters. So that's just our opening. Our first beat is basically the birth of Danger. While that storyline is going on, we've also got Polaris. Now, Polaris is interesting because she is a villain that wants to be a hero. She is of a villain, I should say, that wants to be a hero. There's a lot of commentary in these, especially this season, but the second season about legacy, about fathers and sons, about fathers and daughters, about what you're leaving behind, about nature versus nurture. Polaris is a great example of like being the daughter of a villain that has very similar powers, but wanting to do good with it. She's been a fascinating character since her introduction in Uncanny X-Men number 50. 1960 something. She's been around a very long time, but she's very different than Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch because she's got very similar powers. So she's seen even more as being like her father. But unlike those more villains. They stay on the villain side a little bit more often. Obviously, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch have both been Avengers, but they don't try to be like button-up hero as often as Polaris has. What's interesting to me is, how do you go the farthest away from I'm a villain than joining X Factor? Now, the amount of teams is a very important dynamic for this whole season. I talked about it in the intro here, but the amount of teams also ties into this very important nuance of character arcs and characterization and the beautiful world that's growing in X-Men, because to me, the X-Men are kind of a middle ground. They are trying to appease mutants, they're trying to help mutants, but they're also trying to appease the government, they're also trying not to start fights. To me, they're kind of like the Martin Luther King to Magneto's Malcolm X. He's willing to, Malcolm X / Magneto, willing to actually, have a little bit more violence, a little bit more aggressiveness, and then the X-Men are a little bit more defensive. They're trying to be very passive. X Factor goes a step further than even the X-Men. They're full-on narcs. They're cops. They're people that are working for the government against the very people that they are. Like, they are mutants hunting down mutants for the sake of government. So having Polaris be amongst the X Factor always made sense, because how do you get the squeakiest clean? The squeakiest clean is joining the government itself, even if that means hunting. But she wouldn't do that because she's actually good-hearted. So her betrayal of X Factor, her leaving X Factor with all the purifiers in the beginning, totally makes sense. That rage and that fear of letting out the rage like her father totally makes sense. That's the nature-nurture. Cool to see the purifiers for a second, also from a similar run in that time. But also that establishes these different teams are going to be different dynamics. And I've always seen the different teams as like a Rorschach test. If you're a mutant, are you going to be hyper-violent mercenary willing to kill anyone X-Force? Are you going to be someone that is willing to betray your people X-Factor? Are you going to be someone that's trying to make everyone happy and trying to be neutral X-Men? Are you going to be trying to figure out what the next generation is, Generation X? And Generation X is the new mutants that have been brought into this school. Now, when Generation X was introduced, that was in the 2000s. That was a different generation. Literally, it was 20 years ago. That was Generation X as young adults. Now, I'm really curious what that commentary looks like with having Monet and my guy Chamber and Synch and Quentin Quire, who's from another era, but all these new mutants folded in their first day of school, the first day of Storm as Gold Team leader. All of this is when Danger takes off. Now, I could do an hour on this video because this is a huge episode, but to quickly go through the fight and all those dynamics, I think the morals and ethics and all those interesting questions are then even heightened, because when you add money to anything, it corrupts. As soon as you add money to stuff, it immediately makes you at odds of profit versus people. That's why I personally don't trust large organizations. I have general problems with groups and authorities and people in power, because they are doing things for money, and when there's money involved, it is going to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and money corrupts on the way to absolute power. And now X Corp is literally like, well, if we're not allowed in the government, we're not allowed amongst the people, we have these rights. A company is going to have more rights than people. In this country, it does. In many countries, it does. But especially here, companies have rights, but also they don't pay taxes, or they don't pay honest taxes. There's lots of stuff with companies and corporations that are very interesting in the fine print. Making X Corp juxtaposing X Factor is very interesting. Making a for-profit X team and what that's going to look like and how much, I don't know, they're going to dabble into it, but introducing that concept along with the return of Apocalypse, very interesting to me. As Charles leaves the country, he doesn't feel safe, founds a corporation, and that is something obviously straight from the comics as well. And then at the very end, we get Gambit coming in to be a Horseman of Apocalypse, straight out of the comics, straight from the 12 era of the books, and the first time we've seen him in 2 years since we lost him. And what a return that was, what a death that was, what a show this is. Would love to know your comments in the thoughts below. I never thought an episode with this much Chamber, one, he didn't speak, but I hope he does, that I would have, Polaris in the thumbnail, but they used this character so well, and she represented so much of what this episode was. So absolutely incredible. Great to see Danger get her time. What an intense episode to have Danger. A full arc in one 25-minute window is insane, plus introducing all these other things we talked about. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Like I said, I think it's my second favorite episode of the season, one of my favorite episodes of the entire run of the 90s to now. It's incredibly well written, incredibly well paced, covering so many things, bringing us characters like Beak and characters I never thought I'd see. Would love to know who your favorite was to see pop up. Would love to know what you thought of this review. Would love to know what you thought of these story elements down in the comments. Press like as well. And if you like movies, if you like TV, if you like comics, if you like any of this pop culture stuff, hit that subscription bell. Going to be covering this each and every week. Going to be covering lots of stuff at Comic-Con. Going to be covering Spider-Man Brand New Day. Just covered the Odyssey. Lots and lots of stuff to come. Press buttons. I appreciate you. Go do something awesome. Don't be someone that hates and fears. Be someone that loves and embraces. It's an important distinction of which team you'd choose. I appreciate you. Bye.